Rise Mzansi leader Ntsikelelo lashed out at the ANC during his party's election manifesto launch at the Heartfelt Arena in Pretoria. He says they won't allow the governing party to continue to ruin lives and the future of South Africa's children. The 9-month-old party will contest the upcoming general elections.
We are gathered here today because our country is in serious trouble. It is in crisis. Although many people believe politics is a game of promises, smokes and mirrors, to us here in this room, this is no game. This is a life and death situation that we are in. There is one choice in this election. One question. Are we going to let the ANC continue ruining our lives and the future of our children? Well, we are here today because the answer is a big no. We love our families and communities too much to gamble with their lives by letting thieves stay in power. This is not the future we voted for in 1994. And therefore, it is time to once again move away from an abusive system and leaders who really, really hate us.
The Rise Mzansi leader says corruption is the biggest problem facing South Africa.
Unemployment is higher now than it was 20 years ago. Violent crime is worse now than it was 20 years ago. Corruption is not just worse. It is the very reason our so-called leaders are even in politics today. They even kill one another for the chance to steal from us and destroy our lives. Many South Africans do not trust the police anymore. We do not trust government officials. Too many people in our society tolerate and defend corrupt people. Some even follow politicians, corrupt politicians, when for the 1 millionth time they lie and say they will put an end to corruption, even though they are on trial for corruption.
Meanwhile, Rise Mzansi chairperson Vuyiswa Ramakgopa says that they're ready for this year's general elections.
We will prove to the world that when ordinary people are willing to rise for what's right, nothing is impossible. Over the last 9 months, Rise Mzansi has cemented its place as the only credible political alternative that can lead this country towards a safe, prosperous, equal, and united South Africa.
The party's chief organizer, Magashule Khana, says that they are confident of a substantial number of votes.
It's a combination of the people that we have, the leaders that we have, because when we go to communities, we don't just come in as like we are carrying a basket of solutions. We work with local leaders, we work with people in those communities to craft the solutions to the problems that we all experience. We all feel unsafe, we all see the impact of poverty, hunger, and joblessness in South Africa. So we are confident with the work that we have done with the communities that even if an election was to be held next week, that Rise Mzansi will receive the support from South Africans to be in the National Assembly, to be in some of the provincial legislatures.
Joining us now to unpack Rise Mzansi's Festival of Solutions is political analyst Dr Ntsikelelo Breakfast. Dr. Breakfast, great to speak with you at this hour. What are the main issues that Rise Mzansi's leader, Ntsikelelo, identifies as critical challenges facing South Africa before we take a look at the proposed solutions?
Well, he spoke about all sorts of issues, namely institutionalization of corruption, state capture, power outages, the slow pace of economic growth, the failure of government to support small, micro, medium enterprises, structural violence, gender-based violence. And I agree with him that, men are the ones that are at fault in most instances. And the model of development that is needed to assist the country in terms of dealing with inequality, poverty, and unemployment. But the challenge is that they seem to be downplaying the centrality of anti-poverty strategies like social grants, because he was arguing that those social grants, they are encouraging laziness, which is a problematic argument, because the inequality that we have has a history, a history of land that was taken away from the majority, the history of class exploitation. I know a lot of people who are educated today, who are able to make ends meet, who were educated out of those social grants. So those social grants are meant to cushion the plight of the poor. So I don't agree with this simplistic argument that social grants are encouraging a dependence. And so I think sometimes we tend to speak from a class privilege position, as opposed to understanding the societal challenges that the country is faced with.
Okay, so that's one part of the equation where you illustrate he, in your opinion, seems to have missed the point. But let's talk about the other elements of his manifesto for Rise Mzansi. Now, how do you see them resonating with the potential voters in this year's election?
I think one of their strong points is that the majority of people who are members of the party are young people. Now, the majority of eligible voters of the upcoming general elections are young people. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that the audience to which he was pitching his message to in that venue struck me as a very non-racial audience. I saw people, from different racial categories. And that is important, meaning that the focus of the party is not confined to one racial category. So I think they can solicit a number of votes which will enable them to get a sizable number of seats in parliament. I can bet my bottom dollar that they will get some seats, even though I don't think that they will be in the top three. I don't think that there will be a change in the top three in terms of the electoral performance of the three major political parties. But focusing on them, I think they will get some seats, definitely.
Well, one of the things that's key, Professor, obviously for a party of any nature, particularly a party that is as young as Rise Mzansi, is for them to have reach, to speak to the potential voters. And one of the things that Rise Mzansi has been able to do is they've been able to get to rural South Africa. In fact, they are in rural areas of South Africa where they were not expected to be. They've put up posters already. Would this hold them in good stead? Does this offer them, I suppose, an increased potential in voters ahead of this year's election?
Yes. You are raising a matter which is extremely important, because there are two sources of political power in post-colonial states. The first one is the urban centers, the second of which actually they've got a footprint already in that space, which is good. The second space is the rural section of the population. Now, you know that the ANC has been reduced of late to a rural party. That's where the ANC gets the majority of votes. So by tapping into that space, I think they'll be able to get a lot of votes, which will hamper the electoral performance of the ANC. But the challenge in rural areas is that traditional leaders are the ones who normally give orders to the electorate in terms of how they vote, and those traditional leaders have a link with the ruling party.
Now, you've talked about, in fact, you've criticized the one aspect to Zongezo Zibi's contribution or election manifesto, and that's him attaching laziness to those that are receiving social grants. I'd imagine that his counter would be, well, this is our plan for economic growth and job creation. Was that clear in the manifesto?
Yes, it was. Look, it's one thing to have a plan in the pipeline or in theory, but then you have to respond as of now to the plight of the poor. You cannot put their problems on hold and tell them about plans. Therefore, those grants, I think they go a long way in terms of addressing their needs. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, as I pointed out earlier on, I know many people who have been able to be sent to school, who are educated now out of those grants. You cannot ignore the divide between the haves and the have-nots. That argument of doing away with social grants, it strikes me like an argument that comes from, I don't know, free marketers, people who believe in the free market system, who are pro-market. It's not going to work in our country. Trust me.
So is it an issue of the timing of doing away with the social grant? Do you suppose, now obviously his argument again might be, well, part of our process is to rebuild the economy, grow the economy, create employment, and then do away with the social grant. Did you get the impression, I'm not sure if it was absolutely clear, but did you get the impression that he says if the party, Rise Mzansi, was elected into power, elected into office, that the next thing they would do is do away with the grant before the economy is revived?
Well, the main line of argument was that the social grants are causing laziness. I mean, the foundation of that argument is problematic because it has no historical context. In fact, I would argue and say even in England, they've got a welfare system, and England is a so-called first world country. I mean, so they understand that you've got to reach out to the poorest. Otherwise, you are going to have social tensions. You are going to have conflicts. So to manage those contradictions, you have to have an anti-poverty strategy to respond on the spot to the plight of the poor. Yes, he spoke about a plan, though it was not a specific plan in terms of helping small, micro, medium enterprises, growing the economy, and that is all well and good. All I'm saying is that one cannot downplay the divide that we have in terms of the poorest of the poor and the rich.
Now, Professor, as we draw to a close, is it fair to say that South African politics is largely populist? So if you're an individual or if you're a party that is popular, a lot of people are unlikely to go through the finer detail or the small print in your manifesto, and will hasten to support an individual who is popular. So if that is the correct assumption versus a sound manifesto, where does this hold Rise Mzansi ahead of this year's election?
I'm very critical of this argument that South Africa has a lot of populist political parties, because the concept populism is sometimes used to dismiss, radical political parties that are pro-poor. I mean, for instance, what is the meaning of a populism? Is there a precise meaning? I get the sense that it is used to dismiss people who are more radical than other political parties. So I think we need to re-examine. But I think the party in question does have a role to play in the body politic, because there have been a lot of things that have gone wrong in the country. And even themselves, they argue that one of the reasons why the party was established is to prevent the country from going to the dogs.
Professor Breakfast, always great to speak to you. Appreciate your time. Political analyst Dr Ntsikelelo Breakfast speaking to us ahead of, in fact, speaking on the sidelines of that Rise Mzansi launching its manifesto earlier today. And he argues that they certainly have given South Africa reason to vote.